Why does she need a key? You're never home anyway, my sister sneered, jingling the metal in her palm like it was some prize. I stood in the doorway, Madrid dust still clinging to my shoes, suitcase handle damp in my grip. My parents hovered behind her, faces tight, eyes avoiding mine. They thought they'd done me a favor, trusted her more than me, once again. My name is Evelyn, I'm 29, and if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned. Have you ever had family cross your boundaries so smoothly, so confidently, that for a second you doubt your own claim to your life? Let me know in the comments. The keys glinted under the ceiling light, but to me, they weren't keys anymore. They were dead weight, belonging to a lock that no longer existed. 2 weeks ago, I had signed away the house, sold it quietly while they were still busy counting on my silence. The air in the hallway was heavy with the faint smell of fried onions from Mom's kitchen, but it mixed with something sharper, my realization that I had let them write the story of my generosity too many times. Tonight, their script would collapse. I placed my suitcase against the wall, slow and deliberate, and looked at my sister. Her grin faltered. The house they thought was mine was now a ghost, and in that ghost their entitlement rattled louder than any set of keys. "Why are you looking at me like that?" my sister asked, her voice laced with bravado but her hand tightening around the keys. I said nothing. Silence has always been my sharpest weapon. Dad shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his shirt collar as if the truth already itched beneath his skin. Mom finally spoke. "We thought it would be practical. She lives closer. She can check in on things for you." Check in. Control. Claim. Words they never admitted, but always acted upon. I walked further inside, the echo of my shoes on the wood floor sounding foreign, like a stranger's. My suitcase wheels left faint tracks of Madrid dust. The house was no longer mine, but for this moment it felt like a stage where every hidden script was about to be exposed. "You sold it." My sister's tone tried to stay casual, but her eyes flickered with panic. She had always dreamed of moving into this place, the crown jewel of my hard work, while I was expected to keep giving and smiling. I leaned against the wall, my fingers brushing the cool plaster. 2 weeks ago. Papers signed. Deed transferred. Her face drained. My parents stared at me as if I had confessed to a crime, not simply a transaction. The hallway clock ticked loudly, marking each second of their disbelief. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't on me. It was on them, and the keys in her palm suddenly meant nothing. The silence grew heavy, thick enough to choke on. The only sound was the tick of the hallway clock, cruelly steady, like it had been waiting for this moment. My sister finally broke. "You didn't even tell us? Who sells a house without telling their own family?" Her voice cracked, part outrage, part desperation. I tilted my head. Who gives away keys to something they don't own? Her cheeks flushed. The keys, once rattled like trophies, now hung limp between her fingers. Mom pressed her lips together, a crease forming in her forehead. Dad looked at the floor. The house had always been their stage to show me off when it suited them, holiday dinners, family parties, but it was never mine in their eyes. It was just an extension of what I owed them, another room in the endless debt they believed I should pay. As I stood there, suitcase at my feet, I realized how much lighter I felt knowing I had cut that chain. The deed was gone, the house dissolved from my responsibility, and the looks on their faces were proof that this wasn't just real estate. This was power shifting. "Why would you do that?" Mom whispered, her voice carrying something I hadn't heard before, fear. I let the question hang, because the truth was too sharp for words, and because, for once, silence felt like justice. The walls seemed to lean closer, waiting to see who would speak next. My sister's nails clicked nervously against the keys. The sound was sharp, uneven, like a warning signal. "So, where are you even going to live now?" she demanded, her voice trembling, as if my answer might restore the ground beneath her. "I already have a place," I said simply. The truth, that I had signed a lease across town, a bright apartment with sunlit windows, wasn't theirs to hold. It was mine. Mom's eyes darted between me and my sister. But this house, your father worked so hard helping with the down payment. I cut her off with a look. And I worked harder to pay off every dime they didn't. Don't rewrite the story. The weight of those words made Dad finally lift his head. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Maybe for once he knew arguing would only unravel him. I glanced at the photo frame hanging crooked on the wall. A family portrait where I stood in the corner, smiling too wide, shoulders too stiff. A motif of my place in their story, always present, never central. The glass of the frame was cracked at the corner, and tonight it seemed almost symbolic, like the fracture had been waiting for me to notice. My sister shoved the keys into her pocket, as though clinging to something real. But the truth was already echoing between us. She was holding on to an illusion. The crack in the glass felt louder than her denial. "You always were dramatic," my sister muttered, trying to regain footing, her tone bitter but brittle. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the keys pressing a faint outline through her pocket. "Dramatic," I repeated softly. The word tasted familiar, an accusation they'd hurled at me for years whenever I dared to resist. My reflection in the cracked photo frame caught my eye again, a distorted version of me, warped by broken glass. For once, I didn't look smaller. I looked sharp. "You still wear that perfume." Dad's voice startled me. It was one of those random decoy lines he used when tension grew unbearable, a useless bridge back to normalcy. The lavender scent clung to me. Yes, but tonight it wasn't a comfort. It was armor. "I do," I answered, steady, "because it reminds me I don't have to smell like anyone else's house anymore." Mom flinched. My words landed heavier than I intended, but I didn't pull them back. The walls around us, once symbols of belonging, now echoed hollow. They weren't mine, and soon they wouldn't be anyone's memory of me either. "You sold it just to spite us," my sister accused, her voice rising again. "No," I said, my tone calm but cutting. "I sold it to free myself." Her silence was louder than any scream, and in that silence, I knew the fracture wasn't just in the photo frame. It was in the family itself. The air in the room thickened, like the walls themselves wanted to trap the words we weren't saying. My sister finally broke the silence. "You think you're better than us now? With your trips, your job, your independence?" Her voice cracked on the last word, like it burned her to speak it. I bent down and lifted my suitcase again. The wheels rolled against the floor, steady, controlled. "No," I said softly. "I just think I'm finally me." Mom's eyes shimmered with a strange mix, anger and fear tangled together. "What about the memories here? You'll regret this when you're older." Regret. That word clung to me for years, like a coat stitched by their hands. Every decision I made was weighed against how they would feel, how they would remember it. But tonight, regret belonged to them, not me. The cracked glass photo frame caught the lamplight, reflecting back a sliver of brightness, sharp as a blade. A reminder, even broken things can shine. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. "So that's it? You're just walking away." I met his gaze. "No, I'm walking toward something." For once, they had no script, no prepared guilt, just silence, raw and unfiltered. My sister's hand hovered over the keys in her pocket, but she didn't pull them out. She knew now they opened nothing. And in that moment, I realized my freedom wasn't in leaving the house. It was in leaving the weight of their ownership. I turned toward the door, but my sister's voice cut through the air like a jagged edge. "You'll come crawling back. Don't act like you don't need us." Her words should have stung, but instead they landed flat. I paused, glancing again at the cracked family photo. The fissure in the glass, now, looked like a line drawn through my old life, separating what I used to carry from what I was leaving behind. "You're right," I said quietly, watching her smirk for half a second before I continued. I don't need you. Not anymore. The smirk vanished. Mom clutched her cardigan tighter, her voice trembling. Families are supposed to stay together. Blood is thicker than… Contracts, I interrupted. Deeds. Choices. All thicker than blood when blood keeps trying to drown you. Dad exhaled sharply but didn't argue. He looked older in that moment, as though the years of trying to control me had finally caught up. My suitcase handle felt solid in my palm, more reliable than their promises had ever been. The lavender perfume lingered faintly around me, a reminder of resilience. I stepped into the doorway, my back to them. Behind me, I heard the faint rattle of keys in my sister's pocket, hollow, meaningless. For once, I didn't feel like the fragile daughter, the dramatic sister, the obedient child. I felt like someone rewriting her own script. And the house, stripped of its weight, stood silent witness. The night air met me as I stepped outside, cool and steady, carrying none of the heaviness I had left behind. My suitcase wheels hummed across the pavement, each turn a small declaration. Forward, forward, forward. Behind me, I knew they were still standing there, my parents, my sister, rooted in a house that no longer belonged to me, clutching illusions that no longer bound me. The keys would never open a door for them because the door itself was gone. I paused at the gate, my hand resting on the iron latch. For years, the gate had felt like a boundary I was afraid to cross, as though leaving would brand me ungrateful. But tonight, it was nothing more than a frame for my freedom. A message buzzed on my phone, confirmation from the buyer. Final payment cleared. The house wasn't mine, wasn't theirs, wasn't a weight hanging on anyone anymore. Just a transaction, clean and complete. I looked up at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly, scattered across the darkness, each one distant but burning on its own terms. That's what I wanted to be, distant from their grip, but a light in my own space. If this ever happened to you, if your family ever tried to own more than your house, if they tried to own you, just say same in the comments. I lifted my suitcase and stepped through the gate,